It is hard to imagine the biggest news story of the 20th century being broken by a wide-eyed rookie journalist on her very first week on the job, but that was exactly what happened. In just a few days, the world will be marking the 80th anniversary of one of the most traumatic events in modern history, the start of the Second World War, and the first journalist to report it was a 28-year-old British reporter called Clare Hollingworth. She only just started working for the Daily Telegraph when she shocked the world by revealing that German troops were massed along the Polish border ready to invade. Not only did this scoop define her legendary career, it changed the course of history. Hi guys, I am here at the Imperial War Museum in London, standing beneath this wonderful mural which depicts scenes from the Second World War. Behind me are the objects from the Second World War. But it's really fitting that we should stand here because Clare Hollingworth, the subject of today's video, is one of the true legends of war reporting. So if you like stories like this, please do subscribe. So let us go back to 1939 and the weeks leading up to the outbreak of the Second World War. By this point, much of Europe was already under the control of the Nazis and thousands of refugees were trying to flee these areas. Many made their way to Poland, and Clare Hollingworth was sent to the border town of Sianki to report on their plight. Now the thing is, the British government suspected that war was imminent and they wanted to stop people entering Poland for their own safety. And so they told Clare that she needed special permission if she wanted to cross the border. But undeterred, she borrowed a car from the British consul and drove right up to the frontier, parked her car and walked across into Poland. But she didn't have long to wait before she discovered something that would change everything, because almost immediately she saw hundreds of trucks, tanks, and lorries filled with German soldiers. At first, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She'd been told to expect a sleepy border town, not this. But then she noticed something else. All along the road were signs saying, "Arbeit macht frei," which translates as "work will set you free." The chilling words were later made famous by the entrance to one of Germany's infamous concentration camps. At this point, Clare knew she'd stumbled onto something big, but she had no idea just how big. As she continued her journey into Poland, she came across a string of villages all completely deserted. Their inhabitants had fled in terror. Then she found something truly disturbing. In one of the villages, there was a mass grave containing around 70 corpses, all of them Polish army officers. They'd been shot at close range. Clare had now seen enough evidence that there was definitely something going on here. But she still didn't know the full story. She spent the night in a small village called Kwizna, sleeping in her car, and then returned to the border the following day. What she saw shocked her. Overnight, the area had been transformed. What once looked like a peaceful frontier was now a scene of total devastation. All along the roads were barricades and barbed wire. German soldiers and trucks were everywhere, and many of the buildings had been destroyed. And as she drove through the border checkpoint, she saw something that would change the course of her life. On the other side of the frontier stood a huge column of German troops, tanks, and artillery. They were all massed along the frontier in preparation for the coming invasion. It was an incredible sight, and Clare realized that she was witnessing the largest military mobilization in the history of mankind. She noted down every detail, making sure to take in the numbers of men and vehicles, and then raced back to the safety of the border. Once there, she telephoned the Daily Telegraph and dictated her entire story to a reporter who typed it up straight away. The next morning, the Daily Telegraph hit the news stands with the headline, "German Army Massing on Polish Border." The story spread like wildfire. Headlines around the world carried Clare's story, including in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the German buildup in Poland, but no one really believed that it would lead to war. Within days, however, all eyes were on Poland as the world watched nervously to see what would happen next. And then on September, it all kicked off. German troops crossed into Poland and the country was in turmoil. Clare was already back in Warsaw reporting on the scenes there when the bombs began to drop. She felt the ground shake beneath her feet as a bomb exploded nearby. When she turned to leave, she found that her typewriter had been blown over. The invasion had begun. She tried phoning the British embassy to warn them, but the line was engaged. And so she decided to drive to the embassy in her little MG car. But as she made the journey, she could hear the sound of tanks in the distance. When she got to the embassy, she leaned out of the window and shouted for them to come to the window and listen. The embassy officials heard the tanks and realized that the war had begun. As the news spread around the world, people looked to Clare for updates on the situation in Poland. But despite the danger, she continued to file reports, outlining the heroism of the Polish people and the scale of the German war machine. She filed her pieces from some of the most dangerous front lines, including Turkey, Greece, North Africa, and the Middle East. Incredibly, she learned to fly planes so that she could parachute into war zones. But for Clare, there was no greater sorrow than having to report on the loss of innocent civilian lives. These were the stories that inspired her to keep going. One of the darkest moments of her career came in 1946, when the King David Hotel in Jerusalem was bombed, killing 91 people. Among those killed was Australia's Consul General Sir Herbert Samuel, a personal friend of hers. The attack was orchestrated by the future Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and this event would fuel Clare's hatred for him for the rest of her life. During the war, she wasn't just reporting on events, she was living them. She was trapped in a bombed-out house in Athens as the Germans advanced, forced to hide from Russian artillery fire in Stalingrad, and evacuated from Tobruk just before it fell to the Allies. All the while, she was filing frontline dispatches for the Daily Telegraph, many of which won international awards. When the war in Europe finally ended in 1945, she covered the liberation of concentration camps, bringing home the full horrors of the Holocaust. But Clare was determined to show that there was life after war. She was there on D-Day plus 51 to report on the people returning to the beaches of Normandy. And in 1946, she was awarded an OBE for her services to journalism. After a short time working for the BBC, she went back to the Daily Telegraph in 1949, and it was here that she broke one of the biggest stories of the Cold War, the defection of the British spy Kim Philby. Her editors, however, refused to believe it. They thought that it was a spoof. But that didn't stop Clare from pursuing the story. She continued to investigate, and eventually she got confirmation from another source that Philby had indeed defected to the Soviet Union, but again, her editors ignored her findings. However, a few months later, Philby's defection was finally confirmed and other newspapers picked up on the story. Finally, Clare's contribution was acknowledged and her reputation was secured. She'd proved that she had the instinct for news and the courage to see stories through. Throughout her career, she remained fiercely independent. She never married and instead devoted her life to reporting the news. Even into her 90s, she kept her passport by her bedside, always ready for the next dangerous assignment. She died in 2017 at the age of 104, leaving behind a legacy of fearless reporting that inspired generations of journalists. And that is the story of Clare Hollingworth, the rookie journalist who broke the biggest story of the 20th century. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. It's free and you can always unsubscribe easily. Also, if you want to learn more about the Second World War, why don't you check out our series on the D-Day landings? You can click on the link on your screen now to watch that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new. We'll see you next time.